Hey everyone. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this one-on-one with Vyom. Vyom, a former e-GMAT, is a current student at Wharton, and we're going to talk about essentially two to three things. One, we're going to talk about his GMAT. Two, we're going to talk about how he applied to Wharton, how he got through both Wharton and got into the interview at Harvard. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is his experience today at Wharton. What has he learned? What's been absolutely out of the world? What's been what he expected, and what's not been so great? We're going to even go there. And so, Vyom, welcome. And why don't you just give an introduction as to your background? What did you do prior to preparing for your MBA?
Sure, happy to be here. Hi, Rajat. Hi, everyone. My name is Vyom. A little bit about me. I grew up in India. My father was a journalist, so we kept moving before I went to my high school. Then, after my high school, I did my mechanical engineering from IIT Kharagpur and then joined Schlumberger. With Schlumberger, I
Mhm.
wore multiple hats, um, doing operations to working in headquarters. My job varied from throwing hammer on a muddy oil rig in Middle East to working at Shell Chevron's headquarters in
Mhm.
Northern America and Europe. So it was pretty interesting. The only thing that I was missing in the whole Schlumberger journey was that it was always capped in a small niche of the value chain. I believe that I would be much more interested in looking at the entire value chain across industries. That's why I wanted to do my MBA to understand how the structures work across industries, across the value chain. Came to Wharton. I'm doing my at least pursuing my double majors in finance and energy and environment, and that fits into the confluence of what I have been doing and what I want to do. So looking forward to be an investor in this space. I believe this is one of the fastest moving ship of this century.
Mhm.
There is a lot of money flowing,
Mhm.
and the industry needs people who have operator experience, which means working on those projects and look
Mhm.
at it from financial perspective to be able to control the value chain. So that's the plan.
Okay. Your lingo is really truly that of an MBA. Took me back to my MBA days. But you've one of the other interesting things about your operator experience is that you've worked in what, tens of countries, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that was the most enriching part of being in Schlumberger. Schlumberger has offices in I think 140 countries, I think 120, 140, somewhere around that.
Mhm.
Um, the work that we do is very agile. So we go to a field where we find oil resources, be it oil, gas, solar,
I
wind.
think let's just kind of go back. Tell us what does Schlumberger do, and then in the context of that, just a bit more, and then how you got into just so many countries.
Sure. So Schlumberger is an oil field services provider. The analogy that I gave that people know about candies who made candies like Dairy Milk or Alpenlevel, but where does the sugar come from? So when you think about electricity, when you think about oil, gas, the technology or the sugar behind that is done by Schlumberger. Schlumberger is a Fortune 500 company. We always work on backstage to help create electricity, fuels,
Mhm.
petroleum products. As my job as an operator was to go into the locations where these resources are, be it oil, gas, solar, wind, and help companies like Shell, Chevron, BP, Aramco to extract that by using technology and human capital. I was a part of human capital. I was working in integrated drilling services. So my goal was, or my objective was, to end to end look at drilling operations and ensure that we are extracting those resources. So with
Which
that,
at one time was the most profitable part of Schlumberger, and probably still is.
yeah, we're really proud of the things that we have done in Schlumberger. The biggest
Mm.
part for me was that the work that we do is integrated fully, like from planning to executing it, and that gave me a sense of satisfaction that the value add that I am giving in the whole value chain is actually putting lights in people's houses and fuels in homes. So that was the part, and with this backdrop, I got to move to different countries to be able to do this for different governments and private companies in different countries.
So we still didn't talk about how many countries did you actually, or people from how many countries did you work with,
So I eventually counted. I went to 22 countries with my time at Schlumberger.
and how long was that?
5 years, almost 4.5, 5 years.
Almost 4.5. That's very enriching experience. So even though you, and I don't know if I should use the word even though, but let me know if I'm correct. Um, Even though you worked on oil rigs, you now want to transition into clean energy.
Yeah.
So and tell me that thought process and then MBA in that context.
Yeah. So I wouldn't directly say that I want to work in clean technologies only. My goal is to work on the confluence of energy, poverty, and sustainability, which is one of the most complicated problems. You cannot create more energy without polluting environment if you resort to the own ways. And at the same time, you cannot just shut off oil and gas, because still there are 750, 760 million people who do not have electricity. So this is a very interesting problem which needs a lot of investment, a lot of technology, a lot of people, and I want to be work on the confluence of that so that we able to create a sustainable, clean energy for 5 billion energy poor people, and that number goes to 5 billion as well.
That's true, and yeah, we definitely need clean energy. I mean, it's one of the biggest. It's probably the biggest problem
Yeah,
of our century, and people are trying to solve it in many different ways. There are people who are working on clean energy. There are others who are actually working on limiting solar energy on to the planet so that we don't have the temperatures don't rise. Uh,
yeah,
so you decided to do an MBA, and one of the first things was your GMAT preparation.
yeah.
You took the class, you got a 730. What were the key challenges that you faced in achieving that?
Yeah, being an engineer, having cracked JE math was the easier part for me. The
Mm.
more trickier part was verbal. I am not a big reader. I went to a government school where English wasn't wasn't fully taught. I would say so. My English wasn't super great, and that was the weakness that I identified initially. Critical reasoning was still okay. However, my sentence correction and reading comprehension were weak, and that's when I reached out to folks at e-GMAT, including Reda, that these are the points where I want to work at. And
Mm.
that's when my real performance improvement
Mm.
journey started.
Okay. So RC was a real challenge, SC was a real challenge for you. So
Yeah.
what was the challenge when you say, hey, I wasn't a good reader? So tell me about how did that pose challenges and how did you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so there were two things. First was speed. Second thing was having a deep comprehension. When we talk about speed, I was mentioning I'm not big of a reader, so my speed wasn't on point that I can go through a paragraph in certain time, which allows me to answer those questions quickly. So that was the first thing that I wanted to work on. Second thing was comprehension.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes messages get jumbled up into pros and cons, and then you eventually have to figure out what exactly the author is trying to say. So
Mm-hmm.
having an ability to connect different sentences, paragraphs together while reading it and doing it fast was major challenge. So those two were the double whammy that I faced in my preparation.
Okay. So how did you overcome that?
So my first plan was to increase my comprehension without worrying about the speed. How I can do that? Started talking to folks, mentors at e-GMAT. The things that I found interesting were, as a mechanical engineer, as an engineer, I am used to something very methodical, right? Instead of somebody saying that just read more or expose yourself to different articles, I'm used to a method as an engineer. So that's what I got out of that. Okay, if this is a word, that means this. So if there is a therefore, that means it has a connection. If there is a counter word, which means there is a change in thoughts that is going to happen. So having that process, having that method in mind, really helped me to tame my engineer brain into something which is more creative, just like reading comprehension.
Okay. Now, do you still use those methods? Yeah, because you have to read a lot at Wharton, I'm sure.
Yeah. I still do that. Yes.
Because you
Those
use.
using those keywords is actually something that's going to stay with me for a long time. So yeah, thank you EGMAT for that.
Well, it's thank you to GMAT for that. We just are, in some ways, a messengers. This is what the world needs in
Yeah,
terms of being able to comprehend, and now even in being able to train ChatGPT to build your own models or AI, because they also understand the language of keywords really, really well.
exactly. Yeah, they are designed that way. Yes.
Yes. So, so tell me one thing. Now, you worked with, I know you, Rida was your mentor, and then you worked with a few other folks at email, but you primarily worked through a self-paced online learning course.
Yeah.
uh, so how did that match with your learning style?
Yeah, so I think this was a major learning for me. Um, being being someone who has cracked JE and worked in got decent grades in IIT, I used to think that e-GMAT should be easy for me. I should be able to crack XYZ things by doing my own self study. So in the initial part of my preparation, I didn't really use anyone or any resource or any online guide, thinking that I can do that. Now the
Mhm.
problem with that is that when you do this something which is not structural, you always leave some holes in your preparation. So I think I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, instead of going holistically to XYZ modules. Now that was very detrimental, and I figured out in the midway of my preparation that I need a structural approach. Now that's why having those modules in e-GMAT really helped me, so that I don't leave any holes behind. Because on the surface of a question, it looks like that's something that you know, but then when you delve deeper, there might be certain concepts that you have not covered in your non-structural approach. So I would suggest anyone who is watching that have a structured approach. Do not leave any holes thinking that these are your weaknesses and just focus on them. Have a base level understanding of all the concepts and then work on your weaknesses.
Got it. Um, so you would, on the CR side, I know CR was your relative strength, but you achieved 100% accuracy in your actual attempt. Um, how did you adapt or use pre-thinking in that context?
Yeah, I think the concepts that I learned in reading comprehension were used in critical reasoning as well, and more so useful in critical reasoning in terms of just the sheer performance. Gave me a boost to 100 percentile, because I knew I can think logically, I can think critically. It's just that being able to connect those dots in language in those in that limited time was being a limiter. And once I cleared that, once I understanding that something that I can think beforehand and something that I can break that sentence or a paragraph into XYZ manners, it just gave me more clarity on how I was thinking about things. So I think if we can crack how we comprehend paragraphs and sentences, that takes you long way both in reading comprehension and CR.
Okay. Did you use the data that Scholinium provides to figure out what your weakness is? If so, how?
Yeah, yeah. I was constantly keeping tabs on where I'm missing things and what wrong I am doing. It just helped me to create some sort of framework for those problems. Um, really understanding and doing deeper level analysis as in why I got this question wrong in certain segment helps me understand, okay, what exactly am I missing. It sometimes is a clear answer, sometimes it's not, but my thought process that at least I'm going to give it a shot, whether I can get a pattern out of it or not. If not, then there is just something, um, maybe something deeper, something hidden problem is there, and maybe I'll have to talk to few mentors to figure it out. So these were the three classes of problem. One thing that I can figure out myself what's wrong. Second thing is that do a deeper analysis. Third is get help from someone else.
The beauty about all of this is that you actually went through this in the sequence. You tried to figure things out by yourself
Yeah,
first, and when you do that, I mean, the growth that you have as a student, I think that's tremendous. At the same time, you weren't afraid of reaching out to people like Rida, and hopefully, she answered pretty much the questions that you had if you
yeah, she
weren't
did.
able to. So
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, that's pretty much my advice to everyone is that you can do as much by yourself. It's like, see, if you look at the biggest bodybuilders of all time who have won most of the Mr. Olympia competition, they also have a coach, and the whole world knows that those are the biggest bodybuilders or the best athletes in this space. Even they have a coach, so they always have an additional value of getting an outside perspective to help you put you on your
I
path.
think it's the other way. It's because they have a coach, that's where they are able to go from the top 5 percentile to the top one, top two. Because
Yeah.
at that point, you do need that refinement over there.
Mm-hmm.
You do need that precision and feedback. You can't see it for yourself. I mean, a doctor doesn't
Yeah.
prescribe himself, he has to go see another doctor, even
Correct.
at that level when you think about it.
Yeah.
So, one last question before we go to the application piece.
Mhm.
Preparing while working full time, and especially you probably were traveling a lot. There's no
Yeah,
mean feat. How did you manage that? What were your
yeah,
study schedule like, and what did your plan look like?
Yeah, I think that was one of the hardest part. I have recently moved to a new country and I was just settling my life where I have to start preparing, giving exam, making my application and everything. So it was a bit of a mess. The way I
Which country was that?
Norway.
Norway. You'd moved to Norway. Okay.
Yeah. Um, so it was a little tricky the way I was started thinking about it, and from no way I want to say that it was easy, but what I was doing is I was getting up early and going to office, and before everyone comes to office, I'll finish few of my chapters or complete
Mm,
the modules that I was looking at, and
mm.
sometimes even in between meetings I was doing that. So it was, and it wasn't sustainable. I wouldn't ask somebody to do it for 1 full year, but if you have to do it, if you're crunched on time, that's what you should do. So it would be difficult, but there were the best thing that I did was to have time blocks for my study and then just sticking to those.
What were your time blocks like?
So I will go to office the first bus that I can find, which was at I think 6:25 a.m. And by the time that everybody comes, it's 9:30, 10. So from 6:30 to 10:30, I'll just spend those 4 hours studying.
Got it. Okay. Were you there during summer or winter?
I moved there in winter time. I think Feb end or Feb end March early. So it was
Okay.
fairly cold there.
So fairly cold. The sun wasn't there when you left your home, probably, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't even there when I went to lunch. So the sun
Mm.
is usually from 12 to 3 in winter days.
12 to 3 in winter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been to Norway during summers, and it's just the other way around. It's
I know.
hell. The sun comes out at 1 in the morning, and
Yeah.
if you open the curtains, then you can't go back to sleep.
Yeah, we have thick curtains. We had thick curtains.
Yes. Okay, let's go to application. So let's kind of reiterate. You applied to just Harvard Wharton. You had a 730 IIT KGP background, and so we were talking about this earlier. You said I'm a risk taker. Tell us why Wharton, why Harvard, and why not any other school? What are the key considerations that you had, and in your mind, was this a risk?
Yeah. So, answering your first question about my risk taking behavior, I think that I function best when I don't have a backup plan. Then, this is not something that I've done first time for my MBA application. This is something that I did for my JE as well. I didn't write any other exam, no exam for bits, no exam for NIT. I mean, NIT was even included in the exam that I was giving,
Yeah.
but just my only focus was that I want to get into IITs. And my mother and my father were really panicking, as in, what am I doing with my life? If I fail, then I will have to drop 1 full year, and that's probably not worth it according to them. But it eventually worked out for me. I mean, and this is something that happened in my middle school as well. I'm not going to go into details, but this risk taking behavior, not having backup plans, usually people took it as an overconfidence or arrogance. However, it's just my mechanism, how I work. So I knew that if I have backup options, I might not do as much effort as I should have or would have
Mhm.
otherwise. So I just wanted to focus on two school where I'll be really happy and will have an enriching career going forward, will not have thinking would not have to think twice, as in whether I came here with it make sense or not. So that was the backdrop. Now, thinking about selecting schools, there are two things that were really important for me. First thing is having that value addition to where I am, to where I want to be. That value addition comes from the kind of majors and the brand that school has. Wharton had this energy and environment major. I believe Wharton has the biggest energy committee across all M7 schools, because
Yeah.
Wharton is really taking a big bet on energy and energy transition. So we have a lot of people who have worked as a nuclear scientist in marines, or worked on other sorts of clean energy project. So a big energy community, big
Mhm.
energy major, and I can combine it with finance as well. Wharton, yesterday only there was rankings released by Financial Times. Wharton again is on their number one list, primarily because in finance Wharton has a big name. So when I started thinking about what I want to do, if I want to be an investor, I will probably need all of these things, and
Mhm.
these two schools are providing that. So that went behind choosing those two. The reason why I didn't apply to Stanford was that I always wanted to have a closer Indian community, because at the end of the day, if I have to move back, I'll need a network back home that that I can help to, raise money for my fund or start my own startup or company for whatever reasons.
Mhm.
I want to be close to folks back home, and
Got it.
these two schools are providing a big Indian community.
Okay. That makes sense. Now, I'm going to ask another follow-on question to this slightly later on, but let's kind of go before that. You're an Indian engineer, even though you're from IIT, so that does differentiate your candidacy a bit. But other than that, as an Indian engineer, you're in a very competitive pool. What do you feel were the key differentiators that set you apart, despite being a part of this competitive pool?
Okay. Um,
And you would have done this analysis. I'm very sure that's why you applied to just two schools.
yeah. So there were two major reasons behind that. Schlumberger was one of the biggest reason behind it. Schlumberger has been a hunting ground for MBA schools for a long time. We have a pedigree. Every year we find somebody from Schlumberger, from India operations going to these schools, whoever, most of the people who apply. So that was the first thing I knew, that Schlumberger will get me traction and people will read my application. And the second thing was, inside Schlumberger pool, I think I had a good career, looking
Mhm.
at CEOs, CTOs awards, to these big promotions, to the movements that I did within the company, and having a versatile range. As I was mentioning, being a petroleum or a drilling engineer to a data science to a sales engineer. I did so my breadth of work was big. My depth was also reflected in the awards that I got. On top of that, it was all covered with under Schlumberger umbrella, which is something that B schools value a lot. So I knew
Got
that I will have a competitive advantage.
got it. Okay, that makes sense. Um, do you have your fellow mates from Schlumberger who are a part of your Wharton current Wharton cohort or senior cohort?
Yeah, yeah, there are a few folks. Yes,
There are a few folks. Okay, so you always could fall back on them. You could really reach out to them even when you were applying, or you. I'm assuming you did.
I did. Yes, and they
Okay.
have been super helpful both in HBS and here.
Okay, that's good. So one of the things which is there is look at people within your company and just network with them to figure that out.
Yeah, and they helped me. I mean, as any other senior, they helped me in every part of the process, from selecting consultant to applying to networking to finally coming to Wharton. And even now, thinking about career choices, I'm in touch
Mhm.
with them, thinking how they thought about these things. So yeah, having that community really helps.
Got it. Now, HBS and Wharton, both of them very different applications. Both of them require a slightly different way to think about this. What were the general strategies that you used to build an application that reflected who you were,
Mhm.
and how did you adapt those strategies to Wharton and Harvard individually?
Um, So I think MBA journey has been a very reflective exercise. It's not about those 500 words, but it's about those 50, 100 hours that go behind thinking
Mhm.
what you want to say. So the thing that worked for me was that instead of standing in front of a laptop and typing stuff up, I used to take a walk. And where I was working in Norway, we had what we call fjords. These are the waters surrounded by big mountains. So it was a
Yep.
beautiful walk. I'll go there. I'll have these corporate offices of Exxon and Equinox, and so we used to call it Energy Valley. Very beautiful walk. Nature on the left, corporates on the right. I just used to walk there and think about what story do I want to project, and that used to give me more clarity, as in just trying to put thoughts in words in a Microsoft PowerPoint or Word or whatever I was using. So that reflection after the walk, I'll just write back on a piece of paper, and then
Mhm.
start thinking about themes. As in, after every walk, if I put a new additional story, how does it fit to the other stories, and what is the theme that is coming out of it?
Mhm.
Now, after doing this exercise for a few times, I could figure out, okay, these are the themes that I want to hit. These are the themes that B schools really like. This is the confluence of it that I should be writing about. So that's how I was thinking about my Harvard essay. That was for that. For Wharton, it was specifically related to goals, in what you want to do and how Wharton will help you achieve that.
Mhm.
Thinking about that, again, it required a lot of networking, talking to people and understanding what they have been doing and how Wharton has supported them. So there are two things that become important here. One is that what you are saying should make sense from your background, and second, it should be possible as well, or or
Mhm.
more good better word would be plausible. It should also be practical.
Yeah,
So yeah.
at the same time, you should be pushing the envelope too.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so that's a nice optimization that you have to do. You cannot be vanilla saying I can just want to do consulting. You should have a vision, but you cannot say that you after 2 years of college will become or run for president of India. So so there has to be a balance. And that finding that balance, you have to talk to people and thinking what they have been doing, how much you can push yourself, and what kind of ambitions you can write. Then fitting it back to what you have been doing and where you want to go, that builds your first essay for Wharton. I think that's the more important one.
That's a more important one. Okay. Let's kind of go back over here. So you basically, I'm going to reiterate what you said. So you take these beautiful walks, and stories would come to you. You'd come and write them on paper. So let's say you have, 18, 19, 20 stories, and say each story would reflect a theme in many
Yeah.
ways. And then you said, I would ask myself which themes would work with, let's say, Harvard,
Hmm.
hypothetically speaking.
Yeah.
How did you know which themes would work with Howard? I mean, how did you have that ability to evaluate?
Yeah. So when you go through the blogs and try to talk to people, there will always be some themes that will start to come up. For example, when I was talking to Wharton, sustainability and energy transition was coming in all the conversation. People were talking about conferences, people were talking about majors, people were talking about backgrounds of the folks that they are meeting
But
from.
these are when you say people, current students.
Yes, current students, alumni.
Mm,
So that part of the research is the actual reflection of culture, and admissions
mm,
committee is very aware of that as well, because they interact with students on a day-to-day basis as well. So whatever students are talking is what admissions consultant are talking, or admission committee is talking as well. And when
mhm,
you do this conversation, you realize, okay, this school is big on sustainability. I have been working on energy sustainability go hand in hand, and that's one of the biggest themes that is there, not in B school but in US and Europe as well. So that's something that I want to hit, and how I can do that is by XYZ. And my XYZ stories are reflective of how I feel and think about this theme. So that started building it. For example, for HPS, I remember that a couple of my stories were around rise by lifting others. So that was my one theme of my one of my essays. And
mhm,
I realized that because I was reading other essays and people who have been gotten to HBS from Schlumberger has similar themes, which means that they like it. So these are like few indicators that you find when you're talking and you're researching, when you're talking to applicants, reading other essays, talking to your own firm, as in how recommenders and what kind of stories did those people recommended. So it
mhm.
starts to come up to life slowly.
Okay, I just want to ask. I see the sun's right on your face. Do you want to move to another place?
You can
Or
run it.
yes, yeah, yeah. It's gonna come there in about another 7 minutes,
Sure.
given the way I've been tracking it. Yes. So okay, makes a lot of sense. I want to try and I'm going to put you on a spot. So let's kind of go back to what you were talking about with regards to either Harvard or Wharton. Take your pick.
Yeah.
Tell me, given what you knew with
Mm,
regards to the themes that would work with a certain school, give me an example of a story that by itself is phenomenal,
mm.
but in the context of where you were applying, you say, I thought about it and then I said no to it as a theme.
Okay.
I know this was a difficult one, but
One thing that I can think of is about Wharton. I was working on technology. In my last role, I was running innovation centers in Norway. So I was
Mhm,
very much aware of what a product manager does and how work of a product manager works, from building a roadmap to getting to the end game, or releasing a feature or product.
mhm,
So that is something that I felt that could resonate with admissions committee, and that makes sense as well, because that's something I
mhm.
was doing. I am very marketable in this space, so I will have years. That is again an important feature for
Yep.
admissions committee, that they want to see if this is marketable or not. So that was an
Yes.
easy path. But now that I think about it, you don't want to have a very easy and straightforward path, because your MBA should add a value and should give you a pivot of certain kind. It could be a pivot on your location, it could be pivot on your function, it could be pivot on your industry. So there has
Yep.
to be an additional value or ambition that it drives you that drives through it. So just saying that being a product manager or shadow product manager to product manager by Wharton MBA of 2 years is not very exciting. On the other hand, if you say that you have been an operator and you know this industry very well, with Wharton's double major in energy and finance, you can be an investor. And an
Mm.
investor is something that B schools really like, because you get to control the full value chain as an investor. So that is more exciting. That is more ambitious. It's something that is difficult to achieve, but it's not impossible. But that would create a bigger return on investment on your MBA, and that's something that people would want to hear more.
Got it. And bottom line is again, make it plausible but not so easy, and that's kind of where the not the easy ones is where the stories may be interesting, may be exciting, but that's the one that those are the ones that you rejected.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back to essays. Okay, you had these stories, you took these beautiful walks, and you realized that this is what I want to reflect in my essays. Now, from what I know in terms of your conversations with Rida, you've had tens of iterations for each essay. Tell me, what was going on during each iteration. What did the first three iterations do? If you were to just group them in logical groups, how did they work?
So from the so two things that I can think about is, first is the acceleration of changes. The acceleration of changes have been massive in the first few iterations, then it slowed, and then it slowed even more. Now, in the first part of it, when you think about the content and quality of content, first part was really selecting things that you want to do. Second part was to make a narrative out of it, and third part was refinement. Now, to give you more details, when you think about stories, you just put out everything that you have in the way that you want it to go. And then you start reducing the word count, you start reducing the stories, you start making a narrative out of it. So that's the first part, is in grouping things, and it just
But let's kind of be very specific around it because this is critical. So the first part, you didn't care about the word count.
no.
Okay. And you just said this is what, if you want to just translate this to an example, essentially what you're really saying is I'm trying to, very similar to in RC, you don't worry about reading speed, you worry about comprehension. So
Yeah.
in the context of you, in your first draft, for let's take any particular essay, whether for Wharton or for Harvard, what did you do in the first part over there? How many words was the first, second, third draft? Then as you got to the narrative, right, what did that translate to?
Yeah. So first thought was, as I was mentioning, that it's just writing stories on a piece of paper after those walks. So I have collected all of the stories. Let's say I've collected 10 stories, which I think that are most profound, and people do not, I mean, those are my USP as an applicant, that not everyone can write those stories. For example, I wrote a story of when I went to operations in a militant infested area in Bangladesh, and then somebody got shot in that experience. So that's how I started my Harvard essay. So I knew these are the things that not everybody has. Wrote all of them down, and they show some sort of value and resilience. Once I have the stories on the first few drafts, then I will thinking, okay, what should be the order? What makes logical sense? Whether my Bangladesh terrorism story connects it to how I helped a couple of immigrants in Norway. Does it make sense? Does it have a common theme? Or when I was recruiting for these people, or this group, I specifically recruit one person. So does it theme matches to another theme on the other story? So, just combining all of those and finding out which one relates to what and which one I want to show were the first few iterations.
Got
So
it.
that is not so difficult. The more difficult part was then in the second rounds of iteration, second group of iterations, which is how do I want to portray those stories. Now it should have be in a very specific format. It should not go longer than what I should. It should be succinct in certain words. Should also convey important message. So that optimization then again starts to come up, and then it required a little more brainstorming. What were the major challenges I faced? How did I solve them? Everybody thinks about results, everybody thinks about situation, but challenge and action pair is something that we often miss, and I missed it as well. So in the second round of brainstorming, that was, I was thinking, okay, what specifically was a challenge that I solved, and what would it resonate with my post MBA profession, and whether any learnings would help me do something better after my MBA. So that was the
Got
second
it.
refinement.
Okay. And then the final one was?
Final one was really small touch ups. thinking about small word counts, thinking about crunching everything inside certain word limit, starting with some nitty gritties. For example, how do I make a right hook for my essay? For example, in my HBS essay, I started with a journal entry. This is the date, this is the location, this is what is happening. So date
Mm.
XYABC, then
12th
location
July in XYZ place.
12 July in the middle of rainforest in Bangladesh, threat,
Mm.
security, and terrorism. And then start writing, okay, what was happening here? Similarly, when I was in operations, there was a big gas leak that happened. People were running, there was alarms. And, my job was to figure out what's going on and help it to plug it. And that will require putting somebody in risk in that toxic gas cloud. So how do I make sure that my reader is engaged in that? So I started with, then again, a similar journal entry. This is what I'm seeing, this is what people are running, there is a foul smell, there's alarms blaring. So putting a picture in my reader's mind is in what is happening, and then going deeper as in what I did. So having those hooks, making that readable, making it more engaging, is the final set of iterations.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. That's very, very useful. Now, throughout this journey, I know you engaged an admissions consultant. Um, where did the admission consultant add most value? I'm talking about these 12 iterations. What
Yeah.
was the value that they added at various steps?
So the biggest value that I got from my admissions consultant was with my resumes. Now, this is not to say that it's just only specific to resumes, because resume transcends to your essays as well. At the end of the day, in your essays, you are saying in such situation, this is the impact that you created, and that impact is captured in your resume. So
Yeah.
having that resume is like backbone of your admissions. There I could really realize what is, how do I want to see my work getting communicated, and having
Got
that
it.
having that bigger sense of what is the right narrative for the things that I did actually helped
Mhm.
me in the entire process. So that was the major takeaway.
Okay. Now, throughout all of this, I think it's about a lot of decision making. I mean, you're thinking about all of these scenarios, rejecting a bunch of these, and selecting some, then shaping them and making a narrative out of it, and then just ensuring it has the right hook in there, and it conforms to the word count. So, as a part of this entire exercise, what personal growth have you had, and how have you seen this entire process of um, chiseling your story? Um, how's that helped you during your MBA?
That has definitely a great value in my whole MBA experience. And part of the reason is that these are designed in such a way that it gives you certain level of clarity. um, Thinking and reflecting back on my first semester, I came to this realization that at places like Wharton, you are spoiled with choices. You can do whatever you want. The major important, and you will get through it as well if you put your mind to it. The most important thing is that being selective and having clarity of what you want to do. There are folks who have recruited for everything, because we did a personality test at Wharton, and what the
Mhm.
trait is called as being a maximizer, which means you want to have everything, and that is spreading too thin across different things. So having that clarity of what you really want to do helps you in all of this process, and admissions process is designed so that you get that clarity. Now,
Okay.
that reflection of my goals, what I want to do and how I want to do, really helped me as in what values I really care about and which
Mhm.
space I want to work in. And that came out as energy and environment, which I wasn't super sure before working at Schlumberger. I was just thinking narrowly as in the next day, next month, next year. What is the bigger value that I'm driving out of it, and whether it will make me wake up 1 hour earlier thinking that I'm making a change in this space, and that having that clarity is helping me navigate my MBA time here
So what you're saying is the entire process is not just valuable to get into the schools, but also it's a life skill.
completely.
Okay. Do you want
In
to move
line
again?
that,
Do you want to move again? The sun's right back.
yeah. It's okay.
Okay. Oh, it's a nice East Coast sun. So
Yeah.
yeah, nice. Okay, so let's talk about. I have a bunch of questions there. I'm just looking at the time, and team-based discussion. How did you prepare for that? Tell us what that is, and then what was your preparation?
Yeah. So team-based discussion is one of the integral parts of Wharton admissions process. They just want to see that how do you behave in a group setting, because most of our assignments, projects, clubs that we run, or even the work that we do after Wharton is very team heavy, as you would expect as a post MBA grad. So what they want to really see is that how do you behave in a group setting. So team based discussion is structured with a prompt saying that you have to discuss about XYZ, give your opinion, and then discuss it with your peer applicants. So that's the whole setup. My preparation was having conversation levers, as in XYZ things that I can talk about, which are not specific to a particular topic, because topic might change from group discussion to group discussion. But it will eventually boil down to, for example, if you're looking at a company, it will boil down to its financials, its team, its market, its competition. So you'll always have a talking point without really knowing that industry or the space or the prompt. So having those levers really helped me navigate the conversation. And second thing that was important was doing mock interviews and mock TBDs. We made a group of prospective applicants, and I'm happy that most of them got in as well. We were doing mock interviews, and my strategy evolved over time during those mocks. So I'll give you basic context. We had to select which country we will take our folks, our fellow Whartonites to, for XYZ reasons. I was choosing India, Norway, and other countries, but I eventually found out through my mocks is that people are very sticky to Japan, because everybody knows something about Japan. Everybody wants to go to Japan. So I eventually said that okay, let's go to Japan in my original TBD in my original TBD, and everybody got on board, and that's how I became leader of that conversation, because I
Wow.
proposed that, and I knew most about Japan because I prepared for it. So that was my strategy. Eventually worked out.
I mean, I am just fascinated by how you, I mean, for me, this is data extraction, right? How you've extracted data from informal conversations in
Yeah.
many ways. It's not really data, but essentially saying, okay, I'm kind of seeing bias over here in this direction. So that seems like the least risky approach
Yeah,
in
completely.
that way. Okay, that's fascinating, and a lot of that comes from reflection. When you sit back, reflect on what just happened, what worked, what did not work, and what could have worked. And when you look at what could have worked, if we see a common theme come in,
Yeah,
then that reflection is really important.
correct.
So, um, you talked about how lots of people from Schlumberger, Schlumberger is kind of a feeding ground to M7 schools.
Yeah.
So, which means a lot of probably some of your bosses were also graduates of M7 schools.
Yeah.
So, how did you manage your relationships with them so that your recommendation is in sync with what you say as your post MBA goals?
So the thing that I was optimizing was trust instead
Mhm.
of the seniority of the person or the background of my recommender. Now, this, as we know, that applications process is already super grueling and crucial, and everything is just evaluative. So that I wanted to be a more of a comfort part of the process, that I know that these people have worked with me, they know me better than anyone else, and I trust them that they will put a good word for me, because I have shown my best self to those people. So that was my primary criteria of selecting my recommenders, and I think that is what admissions committee value as well, more than the seniority of that person.
Mhm.
That they really want to know that how well that person knows you, and whether they have specific stories to back their claim about your strengths or weaknesses or not. So that was the thing I was optimizing. I reached out to folks, went to similar ITs, did had a good career in Schlumberger itself, and have done some great things in the industry and this space. But I wasn't reaching out to. I was close to a vice president as well, and he could have written me a good resume, but good, like a letter of recommendation.
Hello, yeah.
But the only thing that I was optimizing is that whether I blindly trust these people to write good word for me, and whether I have performed to best of my abilities in front of them. If that is a yes, and if I can go ahead with this process with them, I just didn't rethink my choices.
Did you actually prep them with regards to this is why I'm going doing my MBA? This is so. Did you give them a document as to with regards to your post MBA goals?
Yeah. So the first thing that they will ask you is why do you want to do this, and why are you leaving Schlumberger? So if you have a specific answer which is believable, and you have shown certain traits in your career which gives them an idea, okay, that you will be a better fit to go into an MBA. So having that conversation is important because that puts both of you on the same page, and then they are equally invested in the process as well, instead of them thinking that
You've
how
got
can I
to
retain.
convince them of the impact you're going to make then.
I got to convince them that my career or my life would be significantly different if I go to an MBA right now rather than staying in Schlumberger for next 10 years. And they believed me because they wanted the best of me. That's again the trust factor is
The
coming.
trust
I
factor. Yeah.
I know that they really care about me and me being professionally successful rather than just a small group dynamics of the team at Schlumberger. So having that clarity really helped me navigate those conversations rather smoothly.
Got it. Now let's talk about Wharton. You've been there for a good, what, 6 to 8 months now?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, August to, yeah, about 6 to 7 months, give or take, I would say. So tell us what's been better than your expectation, what's been at par, and what's been below par.
Hmm. So I would start with the best things that I have seen at Wharton. Um, One thing that I realized coming here is that everybody has some fascinating story behind that, and everybody is very sharp about the things that they have done. I'll give you an example. We had to come up with something entertaining for the rest of our class in 10-15 minutes, and I
Mhm.
could not believe that people did that in 10 minutes. People prepared impromptu stories, people prepared impromptu poems about what is happening around them in 10 minutes. People are singing, dancing on something that you cannot imagine that they have done in 10 minutes. So that was my first interaction with Wharton folks, and I realized that people are quick thinkers, people learn quickly, and they know how to get things done. So that was something better than what I expected. I believe people will be
Not
hard
afraid of challenges also.
hard
10
yeah,
minutes,
I
yeah.
mean, they're doing things that they have never done, and we call it stretch experiences, and people are chasing stretch experiences, something that makes them uncomfortable, something that pulls them in certain way that they have never been. Yesterday I was a storytellers club where people are sharing their stories, and one woman mentioned that for 27 years the story has never come out of her to anyone, including her family and friends, and she was up there standing in front of 150 people ready to
Wow.
share that part of what of her life. She was crying, she was there was like an emotional stretch experience for that she has never done in her lifetime. So seeing that really inspires me that people are doing something that is uncomfortable, and that's where the growth actually comes from. Why am I thinking twice about XYZ things, economy, or I don't have the traditional background or international? If I like something, if I want to chase that going forward, then I will do that. If it needs sacrifices or efforts or failures, I will do that because 800 people around me are doing that as well. So that was very
And they're successful doing it. It's not just a lot of them are successful doing that. So if they can, then so can you.
completely. So that translates to everything that I'm doing, professional or personal.
Mhm.
The thing that I did not expect when I came here was the state of the economy, which seems to be pretty bad right now. Fed rates are super high. People are not raising money. Funds are not raising money. Venture capital is down. Companies are firing. So there is a lot of turbulence going on. But as we were discussing initially, those are the times. If you can push through these times, then it's going to be a smoother ride afterwards. So that's what I'm looking forward to. Have 1.5 years to reinvent myself, being a technologist all half of my decade to something more than that. Takes will take work, will take failures, but I think we'll get there.
Yeah, I think so. You're absolutely right that the economy is not what it was some time back, but this is the third recession that I'm seeing in my career. The first was the dot com, the second was the housing bust, and I can tell you this is the best of those. The,
Yeah.
the housing bust was because in many ways there was, in terms of the percentage of working capital in the economy, there was a lot more capital taken away in both those
Yeah,
recessions. In the current recession, in terms of percentage wise,
it's not
I
that.
don't think it's not that much. B, companies still have a ton of cash with them. At least most companies do, even though lending rates may be high. It's
Yeah.
just because of the ton of cash, their cost of capital has gone up. But other than that, it's not that they can't invest, and they need to invest. I think the third thing is they're still seeking growth,
Hmm.
and so yes, from last year's batch or the batch prior to that, yes, you may have a tougher time, but I think all of you are going to find jobs, maybe, or internships. Maybe it's not 8 months, 10 months beforehand, but within 3 months of graduating, you did that 97, 98% mark where the graduating class that wants jobs has jobs.
Yeah, completely.
Okay. One last question. So, as someone who's been through the JEE prep and through this other grueling experience,
Yeah.
which one would you prefer and why?
Okay, so I would any day prefer JE because it does not have verbal section. So the major difference between these two preparations is JE is like a marathon where you have to keep working on it for 2 years,
2 years,
but
yeah.
GMAT is more like a sprint. You have to, because by design as well, you're working, you have smaller time frames, so everything has to be done in smaller time frame. It has to be done little more intensively. That's debatable, but I would still say it's
Yeah,
like,
I was going to say, because that is a common thing. I mean, you have to make sacrifices in both. It's just that for JEE, that's over a longer span.
correct. Yeah, but GMAT was a little more reinventing in itself because I am not used to doing those kind of exams in my engineering career or in my JEE. I've never written verbal exams of sentence correction or reading comprehension, so it was sort of a challenge. But I'm happy that we got through it.
Okay, I'm happy that we got through it as well. Okay, the other piece is JEE. If you know what you, if I mean, if you have the confidence, if you're doing things right, you will get through. I think that confidence is there. Although I would say on the GMAT that part is there too. So
Yeah.
I take my words back. But I'm surprised. I compared. I asked you to compare the MBA, not the GMAT, and
Oh,
the
okay.
JEE. So you didn't really talk about the application part at all.
Yeah, I mean, application part was the easier part of the whole process, is what I feel. GMAT was the tougher one because at the end of the day, when you're thinking about MBA, you already have a sort of idea. Okay, this experience was really good that I want to put forward. So it's just more of a reflective exercise, pulling those buried stories from you. So I mean, it's a little more subjective as compared to GMAT, but in my personal journey, I think that GMAT was the toughest part because I somewhat knew that what kind of stories I want to put and just have to pull them out from myself and then put them on paper in a legible, interesting way.
Got it. Okay. Well, that was all the questions that I had. Rita did a phenomenal job with regards to preparing the questions, and thank you for answering those questions. The examples that you gave, the frameworks that you provided, I'm sure a lot of people would benefit from those. I want to thank you for the time and good luck. I hope you get the internship that you're looking for or that you want.
Totally. Thank you for having me, Rajat. Thank you, Rida. Thank you, everyone.